Hey, it's your old movie buddy Ed South, and it's another edition of What's Your Favorite Movie, America's favorite podcast that asks the question, hey, what's your favorite movie? All right, on today's show, we are not going to talk about the Oscars again. Number one, they were like a month ago, and number two, we talked about them on our last program. But today's topic does stem from the Oscars, and as you know, one of the more popular segments of the Oscar telecast is the In Memoriam segment, and that is where they pay tribute by playing a nice somber song and showing images of all the different people that work in Hollywood that have passed away in the last year, I guess, since the last telecast. And every year there's always somebody who is forgotten or missed or whatever the case is. And this year, or I guess last year, one of my very favorite actors, performers, comedians of all time, who I have adored since I was a child, passed away. So I was interested to see his tribute in the In Memoriam segment, and it was not there. So I took to Twitter, and I just said, quote, "The In Memoriam section did not include my beloved Tim Conway, and the entire Oscar process needs to be investigated." Just kind of being silly, but yes, Tim Conway was not included in the Oscars. Sure, he wasn't a huge movie star, although he did star in some big movies back in the day, and there are other people in that Memoriam section who have a lot less to do with movies than Mr. Tim Conway. So I was upset. Not anything that kept me up at night, but I tweeted, whatever. And I posted that, and to my surprise, now, I love the Twitter. I post all the time. Nobody ever looks at any of it. This tweet got quite a bit of response. A lot of likes, a lot of retweets, including one by Tim Conway's son himself, Tim Jr., so that was pretty exciting. So I said, you know what? This might be a good opportunity to do a whole podcast about Tim Conway and give him the respect that he deserves. If he's not going to get his picture up on the screen for 3 seconds on an ABC telecast, broadcast to the entire world, then what fitting next tribute would there be than me talking about it for 30 minutes on a rinky-dink podcast? So here we go. It's my Tim Conway show where we will talk about him. Now, if you don't know who Tim Conway is, first of all, I feel very sad for you. My heart goes out to you. He is best known for his part on the Carol Burnett Show, which was a variety show in the 70s. You should know this all. And if you don't, two of his most famous pieces that were on the Mary Tyler Moore, the Carol Burnett Show that you can find on YouTube. One is, just look up Carol Burnett Show Elephant Story, and you will find a hilarious clip where Tim Conway cracks up the entire cast and just keeps going. And then there's another famous scene, Carol Burnett Show dentist sketch you could look up, and that is a really great sketch where he is a brand new dentist and he accidentally shoots himself with the Novocaine, and then he's trying to work on Harvey Korman. It's been done 40 times since, but it was done there, to my knowledge, first, and it is mucho comicio. So look up those two on the YouTube, and you will get a little history or a little quick review of what Tim Conway is capable of. Now, he was mostly a TV star, but he did have a film career. He had 16 to 17. He was in 16 movies with a voiceover in another one, so I guess that gives us 17 movies, plus a bunch of TV movies, but he was a presence on the screen in Hollywood. Let me give you a quick rundown of Tim Conway to complete the memoriam. He was born Thomas Daniel Conway, December 15th, 1933, in Ohio. I was supposed to mention also that he passed away. Well, I did say he passed away. He passed away on May 14th, 2019, last year, from complications of hydrocephalus. That doesn't sound pleasant. Okay, so he was born in Ohio. His parents, Daniel and Sophia. His dad was a groomer of polo ponies. There's one you don't hear very often. He went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio, where he majored in TV and radio. After college, he was in the Army from 56 to 58. Then he came back to Ohio, got involved in local television, and became somewhat of a celebrity, a local personality in the Ohio TV market. He was on shows like Ernie's Place and Ghoulardi, which was one of those late night monster movie shows, and a show called Houlihan and Big Chuck. So he was kind of doing well in Ohio and on TV everywhere. Then the big networks came calling, ABC, and they picked him up, and he became a regular player on the Steve Allen Show, which was a variety show. For those of you also not versed in old television, Steve Allen was one of the original hosts of The Tonight Show before Johnny Carson, and then he went on and had a variety show. Did I say reality earlier? I meant variety. And from the Steve Allen Show, he got his real big break where he was on the sitcom McHale's Navy, which was a wacky World War II sitcom that ran from 1962 to 1966 on ABC. Tim Conway played Ensign Parker, and he was, I don't know, military rankings. Ensign is lower, I know. So like his captain or whoever was played by Ernest Borgnine. The show also featured Joe Flynn, great actor, and the Love Boat's Gavin MacLeod is Happy Haynes. So you know his show is good when you got a character named Happy Haynes. And it's here that in this show that Tim Conway's film career actually takes off, because the show was successful enough after its second season to warrant a feature film. So in the summer of 1964, McHale's Navy, the movie, came out in theaters. So that was Tim Conway's first film, 1964, McHale's Navy, which is for all purposes, an extended version of the TV show. One special treat for viewers was that it was in color, because TV was still largely in black and white in 64, and certainly McHale's Navy was. So that was one big draw for fans to see the show in color. And then the following summer in 65, they returned to the big screen in one of the most bizarre movie titles of all time, McHale's Navy Joins the Air Force, 1965. And in this movie, Ernest Borgnine did not appear. He was tied up with filming another movie, so Tim Conway actually got promoted to star billing. So there you go, right into his second movie, McHale's Navy Joins the Air Force. You got Tim Conway leading the film. To my knowledge, I have not seen either of these films, and that makes me sad and also makes me want to find them now, because I am a bit of a Conway completist, and I have not seen these two, although I think I've seen the first one when I was a little kid, but I haven't seen it in a long time. McHale's Navy, 1964, McHale's Navy Joins the Air Force, 1965. Now, after that show wraps, Tim Conway goes on and does a whole bunch of various TV projects. He was in a lot of short-lived shows that got canceled really quickly, and some unsuccessful shows. So that's from 66 on. And then in 1973, he returns to the big screen in this movie. And folks, this is going to happen a lot as I go through these 16, 17 films, because there are some good ones here, and I love this movie so much. 1973, The World's Greatest Athlete. This is a great movie. Is it really? I think so. What this is, The World's Greatest Athlete, stars John Amos, who you remember from Good Times, as Coach Arthur. And he is on a losing streak with his coach's sidekick, Milo Jackson, played by the one and only, you guessed it, Tim Conway. And so they decide to get away from the sports scene for a little while, and they take a trip to Africa, and there they spot Nanu, played by Jan Michael Vincent, who I believe also died in 2019, and I believe was also not included in the Memoriam, but I don't have a podcast for you, Jan Michael. Anyway, Nanu is this jungle guy, kind of a low-rent Tarzan, and he can run really fast, and he can swing through the trees and all this stuff. Light bulb goes off in Coach Archer's head. We got to get this guy back to California and play for our college and start winning some medals and trophies and the what. And then the hilarity ensues. So Jan Michael Vincent and his pet tiger fly back to California with John Amos and Tim Conway. And, I mean, can you imagine taking a tiger to a college? The funniness that ensues there. And this is the kind of movie where they put a fedora and a trench coat around the tiger and pass him off as a person. So if you can handle that level of where we're at, then you're good, okay? And then Nanu's godfather, Roscoe Lee Brown, who plays Gazinga, he's a witch doctor. He comes back to America to check up on Nanu, make sure he's okay. And in one part, for reasons I'm not quite sure, I just rewatched this the other day, Gazinga shrinks Tim Conway's character, and Tim Conway falls into a woman's purse, and there's literally 8 or 9 minutes of him in a purse set, which of course is before CG, so they built all these giant props, and he's fishing around in the purse, trying to climb up a comb. It's 9 minutes of pure film magic. This movie is called The World's Greatest Athlete, and I implore you to watch it. It's not streaming yet, but when it does, I'm sure I will let you know. I promise I will post it on our Facebook page when it gets to Disney Plus, and you will clear your schedule and watch it, and you will thank me for it. All right, so that's 1973. In the meantime, after this film, Tim Conway starts to blow up on the Carol Burnett show. He does so many guest appearances, and he's really good. He joins the cast. So by 1975, we got a full-fledged Tim Conway starring vehicle, and this is the first of 6 films where he teams up with Don Knotts. Now, you, of course, know Don Knotts, probably famously from television as Mr. Furley on Three's Company, but he also had a long, storied history in television. Of course, he was in, what's the other sitcom he was in? The Andy Griffith Show. So they team up Tim Conway and Don Knotts for 1975's The Apple Dumpling Gang. Folks, this is a movie you've probably heard of. This is a movie you need to revisit, especially if you have kids, and you will enjoy 90-so minutes of pure entertainment. The Apple Dumpling Gang was one of the top-grossing movies of 1975, so you know it's good. And you got the Don Knotts. You also got Bill Bixby in this, who you might know as the Incredible Hulk. You might know Susan Clark as Ma'am from Webster. Ma'am. And then you got Slim Pickens, Harry Morgan, round out the cast. And this is a real Western. I mean, you could play this on a Western channel. Sure, it's a little goofy and silly at parts, but basically Bill Bixby rolls into town and ends up with these 3 kids as his he's in charge of. So he's trying to unload them and get out of town. And the kids have a secret map for gold, and the whole town's after them. And these kids hire or get in cahoots with Don Knotts and Tim Conway to help them find the gold. And wackiness ensues. Wackiness ensues. You should revisit it if you haven't seen it in a long time, or if you've never seen it. And good news for you, it's on Disney Plus. So if you have the Disney Plus streaming service, you can, as soon as this podcast is dial up 1975's The Apple Dumpling Gang. It has a 6.5 rating on IMDb, which is pretty good for a movie like The Apple Dumpling Gang. So check it out. Now we're going to go to his next film, 1976. This is a movie so near and dear to my heart that I think I've mentioned it at least a dozen times in the 3.5 years that we've been doing this show. 1976's Gus. Gus is a movie that I would marry if I could. What happens in Gus is a really, really bad football team in situations similar to The World's Greatest Athlete ends up with this donkey and this kid from another country and this donkey who can kick field goals. And he starts off as the halftime show, but he ends up playing for the team. And you can imagine the craziness that happens when a mule is on an NFL football team. Tim Conway Tim Conway's character is named Crankcase in this. So that should, again, tell you how wonderful it is. And listen to this cast. You have Ed Asner. I believe he owns the football team. It's been a little while since I've seen this one. He owns the football team. Then you have Don Knotts, their second film together, although I'm pretty sure they don't have any scenes together even. But Don Knotts is the coach of the team. And then you round out the cast with, listen to these heavy hitters: Dick Van Patten, Bob Crane, Dick Butkus, Harold Gould, and Tom Bosley. Tom Bosley plays Spinner, and him and Crankcase, Tim Conway, get out of jail. They're some bumbling crooks or ne'er-do-wells, and the owner of another team, Harold Gould, hires them to kidnap, or donkey nap, I guess, the donkey. Now, I saw this movie when I was in the 3rd grade, so that puts you at what, 6, 7, 8 years old? To this day, I don't think I have ever laughed as hard as I did when I saw this movie as a kid. There is a scene in the grocery store where Tim Conway and Tom Bosley are chasing after the donkey, and it's extremely slapstick, and if I watch it now, I can see that it's not the funniest thing in the world. But when I was 8, that made me laugh so hard. I literally remember sitting there and watching it. So it is a film that is near and dear to my heart, and it's a great film still. It holds up. It's a great... I think I mentioned it on our sports show when we did a sports show a few years ago. It's the best football movie ever, hands down. And I'm going to post some pictures of this movie on Twitter when I'm done here. So go to our Twitter page at WYF Movie Podcast, and you can see the wonders of Gus. I showed this movie to my kids a few years ago. They agreed. I've been talking about it forever with them, and they finally agreed to watch it on my birthday as kind of like a birthday present for Dad. They were not amused, but it is a little slow. It is a little outdated in its filmmaking style, and it's a kid's film, but oh man, you just can't go wrong with 1976 Gus. Now we're going to move on to the 6th movie on our list, and we're in 1976 still. Tim Conway does another film for Disney, and this one is called The Shaggy DA. DA as in District Attorney. This is a direct sequel to the 1959 Disney classic and huge blockbuster hit, The Shaggy Dog. This doesn't have anybody from the original cast, although Dean Jones plays the boy, is the grown-up version of the boy in the first movie. So you got the great Dean Jones, Suzanne Pleshette, Keenan Wynn. If you don't know who Keenan Wynn is, you should introduce yourself to him. Dick Van Patten, and then here, listen to these bangers. Joanne Worley, Vic Tayback, Mel from Alice, yes, and Pat McCormick, who played Big Enos in Smokey and the Bandit. So you got all of them, and Tim Conway plays... Are you ready for this? Tim Conway plays Tim. And Tim is an ice cream truck driver. Dean Jones is running for district attorney of his village or neighborhood or what, city, I guess. State, I don't know. What do you run for district attorneys for? Counties? I don't think they really say. And Dean Jones discovers that the curse of him turning into a sheepdog from 1959 is still active, is still happening, and he starts turning into a dog while he's running for DA. Tim Conway is the ice cream man in the neighborhood, and in dog form, the dog, Dean Jones, enlists the help of Tim Conway to help him clear his name, right the wrongs, do the do's or whatever. So there's a lot of scenes of Tim Conway and the dog, which is fantastic. And then Tim Conway also in the movie is dating Joanne Worley's character, who is a rollerblader, roller derby. And listen, any movie, I'm dead serious about this. Any movie that at any point finds itself entering a pie factory, this is a movie you need to sit up and pay attention to. There is nothing greater in a film. There's nothing greater than when a film has the confidence and the silliness level to go into a pie factory, because a pie fight will ensue. And I was watching the audio commentary of, I guess I was listening to the audio commentary on the Shaggy DA DVD, and Tim Conway talks about how they had a professional pie thrower to throw the pies off a frame so they hit people in the face. I mean, come on, a pie face. What a great job that would be, to be professional pie fighter. That would be a great, your parents would be so proud if you were a professional pie thrower. Magical. Anyway, this is a really good movie, and this also really shows off Tim Conway really, really well. Probably his just a really good showcase for his talents. It was, if it was almost written for him. The Shaggy DA, 1976. You can also find this on Disney Plus, so you're in luck there, as well as the original Shaggy Dog, if you want to go back and watch that as well. Fun fact, Shaggy Dog, only one of 3 Disney films that were ever, of all the Disney films, shot in black and white. Only 3, because Walt felt the special effects looked better in black and white. He was a smart guy, that Walt Disney. Smart guy. All right, so we move on to the next year, and here is where Tim leaves the Disney stable and does his own G-rated non-Disney film that he writes himself, and it is called The $1 Billion Hobo. I will admit that I have not seen The $1 Billion Hobo, to my knowledge, although I can't imagine passing it up as a child, but I have no recollection of watching this movie. Tim plays Vernon Praiseworthy, and he is heir to his uncle's fortunes. But in order to inherit the fortunes, he must travel as a penniless hobo on the rails, riding the trains, just like his uncle did during the Depression. And his uncle's name is Train, Trayne, but his name is Choo Choo Train. So you also have to think of any movie that has a pun that good and puts it in a name. Come on. The $1 Billion Hobo, 1977. I have not seen this, and I have decided to dedicate my life to watching it. It's on Amazon. Like, you can buy it on Amazon. It's not on Amazon Prime, so maybe that's the route I'll go and check out The $1 Billion Hobo. After that, he did another movie, 1978. He did another movie, Ed? Is that what we're talking about? They Went That Away and That Away. Another film written by Tim Conway. This also not a Disney film. This also I have not seen. So it's interesting that these two movies, although they're very similar to the other films, I imagine, are not as readily available as the Disney films. These other films fall by the wayside and get lost in the shuffle of history. But Disney knows, you can say what you want about Disney. They value their product and they keep it relevant. They keep it out there, and it's always available for people to watch. So They Went That Away and That Away, 1978. Again, this was written by Tim Conway. Co-stars the great Chuck McCann, who is another 70s cornball actor that only I still talk about. And here's the IMDb write-up for this movie. Small-town deputy is ordered by the governor to go undercover, posing as a criminal, in a maximum security prison. Shortly after the mission begins, the governor dies, leaving him and his partner stranded in jail. Sounds like a winner to me. They Went That Away and That Away. I believe I recorded this on the DVR somewhere in the last 10 years and never got to it, and it got bumped off. It was on one of the movie channels, but I would love to see this as well. This is another great thing we don't do in movies anymore. Cast multiple people from the same television show in a movie. This movie has, from the Dukes of Hazzard, Enos and Cooter together again in a movie. So if you like Dukes of Hazzard and want to see Enos and Cooter on the big screen, maybe They Went That Away and That Away is your choice. You can buy this off of Amazon as well in their streaming service if you want to spend the money to do that. All right. That's cheating to me. I like to find things, so I don't usually go to Amazon and rent movies off of their digital thing. I'll watch it on Amazon Prime, but I don't spend the money usually because I'll just watch so much bizarre wackadoo stuff that it's a way I keep our finances under control. All right, so after that, They Went That Away. 78. The following year, he returns to Disney one more time for the obligatory sequel, The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. And this film teams Tim Conway and Don Knotts. Nobody else from the first movie is in it except for Harry Morgan, who returns but plays a different character. So I don't know how that works. I don't like a million actors in Hollywood, but you're going to get the same actor and just play a different. It's fine. Who cares? It's the Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. So I think they cut some slack. Good fun film with Tim Conway and Don Knotts. We didn't talk about I guess we can get into it in a minute, but what makes the comedy team of Tim Conway and Don Knotts so great that they did 6 pictures together, and we'll circle back to that in a minute. Well, let's just stay there because I see the next 2 are them. So what makes Tim Conway and Don Knotts so great together, besides that they're both great physical, they're kind of both the same kind of physical comedian where it's their facial expressions and their mannerisms that kind of sell their comedy, and neither of them are necessarily leading men material. But when they're together, it's great because they're both idiots, but somehow Don Knotts comes out as being less of an idiot than Tim Conway, and he's the smart one, but neither of them are smart. It just works really well. When I was watching one of these the other night, I was trying to figure out what their, dynamic is, because when you think about Abbott and Costello, one's the straight man, one's the funny man. Laurel and Hardy have their roles, but Don Knotts and Tim Conway kind of do the same thing, except that Don Knotts gets annoyed with Tim Conway because he's the bigger idiot. I don't know. That's my comedy analysis in a nutshell. So where were we? The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. Not as big of a hit as the first one. It was made for $5.4 million and grossed almost $21 million. So it still did good for the Disney studio, and people were still wanting to get their Tim and Don on. So much so that the following year, we're still in 79. So later that year, they go off on their own, leave Disney, and they make a movie called The Prize Fighter in 1979. And this is one of several boxing/wrestling films that was inspired after Rocky. And this was written by Tim Conway, and it again stars Don Knotts. And this is the old, throw the fight, mobsters, all that kind of stuff rolled in to it. I've seen this once a while ago. I don't remember. It was fairly recently, but I think I was dozing off in it, but it actually came up on my Facebook the other day on my memories that I had posted that I was watching the final of the 6 Tim Conway, Don Knotts films that I had not seen. So it was a big night in my life to watch this, and then I fell asleep for it. Tim Conway plays a character named Bags, and Don Knotts plays a character named Shake. So I think all you need to know is they play Bags and Shake. It's called The Prize Fighter. It is very hard to find. I don't even think it's on the Amazon rental thing. So good luck finding it, but it's a movie that exists, so maybe you will find it. Now we're going to get to, this might be my favorite film on the list. I'm not sure. There's so many good ones, but this movie, 1980, amazing. 6.8 on IMDb. So, other people like it too. I think this is definitely, while it might not be traditionally the best film of Tim Conway and Don Knotts pairing, it is the film that shows off their comedy chops. It showcases them the best. It is called The Private Eyes, 1980. This used to play on HBO. Most people who know this movie know it from the old days of HBO, where it would run all the time, and it was the perfect movie to play on HBO because it was suitable for kids, but I think a lot of adults got tricked into watching it as a serious comedy film. In it, Don Knotts is Inspector Winship, Tim Conway is Dr. Tart, and they are called to investigate the murder of Lord and Lady Morley at a big, huge mansion. It's kind of a Sherlock Holmes parody. It's similar to Clue in the setup. They arrive. There's a staff of suspects. They all get picked off one by one. It's a very familiar plot. You're not there for the story or the plot. You're there to see Tim Conway accidentally set things on fire and make funny faces and whatnot. But it kind of has a Scooby-Doo vibe. It's almost like a live-action Scooby-Doo movie, except that there is a live-action Scooby-Doo movie, and this is better. But it's just like the creepy castle and whatnot. One thing I love about this movie is its PG rating, and it is PG borderline G, but there's some jokes and setups that are like not really dirty, but like what a little kid would think were dirty. So there's like there's just come some mention of bosoms, and there's a scene where she's talking about wearing a nightie, and they're like all drooling over her talk. It's so funny and silly and goofy, and it's such a well done movie and a perfect showcase for what Tim Conway and Don Knotts can do together. Really simple, small, low budget, great movie. I watched this a day or two ago and just laughed all the way through it, even though it's like the 99th time I've seen it. Here's a bonus treat. If you go to IMDb and look up this movie, there's a video. I didn't know they did this, but I guess maybe IMDb owns the rights to the old Siskel and Ebert shows. They have an entire episode of At the Movies or Coming Attractions or whatever one of the older incarnations of Siskel and Ebert was. But you can watch the entire episode. If you drag it up to 17 minutes, you'll see the two of them review this movie with plenty of clips. Spoiler, Gene Siskel liked it very much. Roger Ebert did not like it. And this movie is out on Blu-ray, so you can find this, I doubt, in a store, but you can order it online. And it's worth every penny, no matter what you pay for it. 1980, The Private Eyes, Tim Conway and Don Knotts. Really their last great pairing on screen as far as a whole movie, because that takes us to their next film, which was their final film together. And they're only in one scene, but it's magical. And I actually didn't even write down any notes under the title here, because I can tell you all about this movie with no notes. Cannonball Run II, 1984. Cannonball Run, the original from 1980, 81, I forget, 81, I think. In the top 3 all-time favorite films of mine. Absolutely love the Cannonball Run. The sequel, while fun, is not as good as the first one, as sequels often are and almost always were in the 80s. But if you know the Cannonball Run, you know it's a cross-country car race from sea to shining sea, and it's an illegal race, so all the racers use different disguises or try to figure out ways that they can get from one end of the country to the other faster. In the movie, I believe it is Terry Bradshaw or Mel Tillis. Oh, I think it's Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw and Tony Danza. I'm wrong about the Terry Bradshaw. Don't quote me on who it is. It's Mel Tillis. Does it matter, Ed? It's a country football-y guy. I don't know. And Tim and Tony Danza drive a limousine that's like a gag limousine with a fake front seat, and they have an orangutan driving in the front seat in a suit, like a chauffeur outfit, because that makes sense. And so anyway, they're racing, and in one part, the greatest scene of the whole film, and it's not a spoiler because it's in the trailer, whatever, and also the movie's like 30-some years old, so you should have seen it by now. But they get pulled over by the cops. It's Tim Conway and Don Knotts as the California Highway Patrol, and they are to issue a ticket to this orangutan, and then the comedy starts. It's only like a 2 or 3 minute scene, but it's phenomenal. It's worth watching the whole movie just to see that. The movie's not horrible, in my opinion. It's also the last film of it's the last film of a lot of people, not only of the Tim Conway Don Knotts pair, but it's the last movie of Frank Sinatra's and Dean Martin's. So Cannonball Run 2, it's on TV all the time. You can check it out. We got to pick up the pace here. Number 13 is another film that I think Tim Conway wrote. I didn't write that down, but it's called The Long Shot. This is from 1986. It's about four guys who borrow money from gangsters to bet on a sure thing at the racetrack, and then they lose, and then the mob's after them. Pretty standard stuff. I did write down. Was also written by Tim Conway, directed by Paul Bartel, who did Eating Raoul and Lust in the Dust, a couple of cult classics, and not a great film. I rewatched this one recently, and it was better than I remembered it. You got Tim Conway, and then he's paired up with his other partner throughout a lot of things on television, Harvey Korman, the great Harvey Korman. And then also the four guys, so it's Tim Conway, Harvey Korman, Jack Weston, who was Mr. Kellerman in Dirty Dancing, and Ted Wass, who you might remember as Blossom's dad. I love when movies have lots of people that I can do like that. Anyway, and one of the most amazing things about this movie is the theme song at the end. This is 1986. The theme song, Rappin' Down the Track. Lyrics by Tim Conway, performed by Ice-T and Tim Conway. Let me say that again. Lyrics by Tim Conway, performed by Ice-T and Tim Conway. That's a magical combination right there. Rapping down the track. So that is The Long Shot from 1986, and you can find this on Amazon Prime for free if you have that, so you can check it out, or just pop it on, zip all the way to the end, and listen to Rapping Down the Tracks by Ice-T and Tim Conway. So at this point in 1986, Tim Conway actually gets involved with a character named Dorf, who you might remember. Dorf was basically Tim Conway standing under a raised platform where he had shoes where his knees are, so it looked like he was teeny tiny with long arms, and he played golf and he played all kinds of sports, and it was very, very successful for Tim Conway, and they made a boatload of direct-to-video, not even movies, like half hours, and I've seen all of them. So he did that for a long, long time, and I think he made a lot of money off of that and sailed very smoothly for a long while. So Tim Conway had a 10-year absence from the big screen, and it wasn't until 1996 where he pops up again in a movie called Dear God. Now, I will tell you, when 1996 me, mid-20s, saw the trailer for Dear God, and I was already interested in it. It had Greg Kinnear, who was hot off of his show Talk Soup, and Tim Conway popped up in the trailer. I went nuts, like holy crap. And I was there opening night to see this movie. It's kind of like a take on Miracle on 34th Street as far as the letters to Santa scene at the end, and this is about letters to God and the office at the post office, the area where they handle the letters written to God, and they start writing out letters and fulfilling dreams and all this. And I haven't seen this in a long, long time, but I remember it being really good. And of course, Tim Conway is fantastic in it. You also got Laurie Metcalf from Roseanne. Roscoe Lee Brown, who was in World's Greatest Athlete, pops back up. I like to imagine Tim Conway and Roscoe Lee Brown sitting around talking about the good old days on World's Greatest Athlete while they were making Dear God. And one last credit of note in Dear God, the one and only, absolutely wonderful Rue McClanahan, who you might know as Blanche from The Golden Girls. So that's Dear God, 96, and that movie did pretty well, and I think, if I recall, Tim Conway got a lot of good reviews and a lot of positive energy his way. So it wasn't until the next year, 1997, that Tim Conway pops up in a full-fledged blockbuster big hit summer movie. He is in Speed 2 Cruise Control with Sandra Bullock, Jason Patric, and Willem Dafoe. And again, I went crazy when I knew this was happening, and I was there opening weekend to see Speed 2 and laughed myself silly. If I recall correctly, he's only in two scenes, in the very beginning and the very end. Tim Conway plays Mr. Kentner, Sandra Bullock's driving instructor, and it is funny. And this is a movie that made $164 million worldwide, so probably Tim Conway's biggest grossing film of his entire career. Also of note, it's the only movie that Tim Conway appeared in that was above a PG rating, PG-13 for this one. And a fun side note I didn't know when I was researching, Speed 2, the script is actually Die Hard 3 that they passed on. This was written as Die Hard 3, and they threw a boat in it and Tim Conway, and it was off to the races for Speed 2. So you know Speed 2. You can find it. If you haven't seen it in a while, you should watch it again. Now, Tim Conway's last on-screen appearance on the big screen was in 1998's Air Bud Golden Receiver. That's right. The first two Air Buds were theatrical films before they went on to make 12 more for DVD. But Tim Conway is in the second film, Air Bud Golden Receiver, where the dog, I guess, plays football. And from the looks of the trailer, Tim Conway and the great Dick Martin from Laugh-In are like either radio announcers or maybe the announcers at the ballpark or something, but it looked pretty funny, just their scene. The rest of the movie doesn't look so funny, but Tim Conway and Dick Martin as radio announcers is a good time to be had by all. That is Air Bud Golden Receiver 1998, and that is not on Disney Plus. I checked. A lot of the other Air Buddies films are. In fact, Tim Conway voiced Deputy Sniffer, ladies and gentlemen. Deputy Sniffer in 4 of the other later Air Buddies films. They all went to DVD, so we're not talking about them in this program. So that was his last on-screen appearance on the silver screen in the theater. He also did a small voice part in the 2015 SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water, parentheses, which is actually fantastic. He voiced a seagull. Tim Conway was involved in the SpongeBob series where he played Barnacle Boy in over a dozen episodes, kind of like SpongeBob's version of Batman and Robin was Barnacle Boy, and I can't remember the other guy's name now, but that was voiced by Ernest Borgnine. So that was pretty cool. So that was his last time on the silver screen. Of course, he kept busy all the way up until the end. He actually did a Hallmark movie a few years ago called Surprised by Love, where he played the granddad, and he was on TV all the time. Actually won an Emmy for guest spot on 30 Rock in 2008. Not to mention he won an Emmy for Coach in 96 and a whole bunch for the Carol Burnett Show. But that was back in the day. So he was busy up until the end. Even did some voice work on the How to Train Your Dragon series. So that is the film career of Tim Conway, a beloved actor who I enjoy so much, and really sad that he's gone, and even sadder that the Oscars ignored him and didn't give him his due. But joke's on them, because he got a whole episode of this podcast. So that's kind of better than an Oscar, I think. You could ask around, but I don't know. Alrighty, so I hope you will check out some of these films, or if you even want to see some of his TV work, The Carol Burnett Show, which you can find clips of on YouTube. You can probably find all of this stuff on YouTube, but also they have select episodes of The Carol Burnett Show on Amazon Prime, as well as it airing on MeTV. You can find McHale's Navy on Antenna TV if you get that. All right. I want to thank you for listening, and hey, you should check out my Twitter at Ed South for all kinds of fun stuff, including that groundbreaking Oscar tweet. And you can find the show at WYF Movie Podcast. We're on Facebook, Instagram. You can email us at favemoviepodcast@yahoo.com. Hey, we're now on iHeartRadio. So if you use iHeartRadio, you can subscribe to us in there, and you'll know when new episodes are out. And while you're listening to Pitbull and Ariana Grande, you can jam with an episode of What's Your Favorite Movie on iHeartRadio, as well, of course, as Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Podcast Addict, whatever that is. All right, folks, and as always, you can share the show with your friends. That'll be a big, big help. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again in 2 weeks, or maybe even sooner if you're going to binge some. Until then, my friends, it's khaki wishes and cookie dreams. See ya.